Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible machinery of the internet. We're going to demystify the back end, that hidden engine that powers literally every website and app you use. So let's dive right in. I mean, really think about it for a second. You click a button on a screen, and in what feels like a split second, you're logged in or your order is confirmed. It's wild, right? It feels like actual magic, but it's not. It's a really complex, totally invisible process. So what in the world is going on behind the scenes? So to get our heads around this magic, you first have to know that pretty much every web application has two distinct sides. You can think of them like two sides of the same coin. You've got the front end and you've got the back end. Okay, here's a super simple way to think about it. The front end is the beautiful, polished storefront you walk into. You see the products, you can browse around, but the back end, that's the huge, bustling warehouse and the busy kitchen out back. It's everything that actually makes that storefront run smoothly. Yeah, so the front end is everything you can see, everything you can touch on a website. The layout, the colors, the buttons, all the cool animations, that is all front end. It's built specifically to be easy and hopefully enjoyable for you, the user, to interact with. But the back end, that's where the real heavy lifting happens. It's the brains of the whole operation. When you log in, the back end is what checks your password. When you buy something, it's what processes your payment and tells the warehouse one less item is in stock. You never see it, but you would for sure notice if it ever stopped working. Okay, so we have these two sides, the front end and the back end. But how in the world do they talk to each other? Well, it all happens through a process we call the client-server model. It's basically a little back-and-forth dance that happens in 4 steps. First, your browser, that's the client, sends out a request. That request travels across the internet to another computer called the server. The server figures out what to do, processes it, and then sends a response all the way back to your browser, which then updates what you see on the page. This happens every single time you do anything on a website. This restaurant analogy, it absolutely nails it. You're at the table and you order a pizza. That's your request. The kitchen gets your order and makes the pizza. That's the server processing everything. And then the waiter brings the finished pizza to your table. And that's the response. See? Simple, right? Right, so what's actually in this kitchen? What kind of tools is the back end using to get all this work done and prepare all those orders? Let's take a peek inside the toolbox. Well, the biggest and most important tool is the database. This is basically the application's long-term memory. Think of it as a massive, perfectly organized digital filing cabinet that stores absolutely everything. Every user's profile, every product in the store, every comment ever posted. The backend's main job is just to talk to this database to find, save, or update information. And look, this is what that data can look like. It's not scary, right? It's just a table with neat little rows and columns. When you try to log in, the backend quickly looks up your email in a table just like this one to find your info and check your password. Okay, so if the database is the big filing cabinet in the back, how does the backend actually get stuff in and out? Well, that's where something called an API comes in. The API is like the waiter in our restaurant. It's the messenger that carries the requests and responses back and forth in a language that both sides can perfectly understand. And this, right here, is what that conversation can actually look like in practice. The front end might send a request that says, hey, get me the student with ID number 1. The backend's API then goes, looks in the database, and sends back this little packet of data with ROM's information. This whole structure with the curly braces and the labels, that's called JSON, and it's just a super common way for systems to pass notes to each other online. When you start thinking about servers and APIs and databases, it starts to sound incredibly complicated, right? And honestly, it can be. That's exactly why developers have a secret weapon to handle all this complexity: frameworks. And that brings up a really good question. Why use these pre-built tools? Couldn't a developer just code every single piece of the backend themselves? And yeah, they could. But wow, it would be incredibly slow and really, really inefficient. Think of frameworks like a pre-built house frame or a really good set of power tools. They handle all the repetitive, common stuff, like basic security or connecting to the database. This frees up developers to focus on building the unique, cool features that make an app special. And a really, really popular example of one of these back-end frameworks is Spring Boot. It's a huge industry standard.
Countless companies, from tiny startups to giant corporations, use it to build strong, reliable applications using the Java programming language.
So what's the big deal? Why do so many developers love it? Well, it's all about making things simple and fast. It automatically configures a ton of stuff for you. It can run all by itself without needing a complicated server setup, and it's built for the real world with tools to monitor an app's health. Basically, it just clears away all the boring, repetitive stuff so developers can get to the fun part.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, haven't we? We went from the pretty storefront all the way back into the kitchen, and we looked at all the tools inside. Let's do a quick recap.
Let's do a super quick recap to lock it all in. The front end is what you see. The back end is the engine doing all the work. They talk to each other using the client-server model. The back end uses a database as its memory, an API as its messenger, and a framework to build everything way more efficiently. All these pieces have to work together perfectly to create the smooth web experience we take for granted every day.
So from now on, every time you click login or add to cart, you'll know it's not magic. It's this incredibly fast conversation happening between a client and a server. You've peeked behind the curtain. You get the basics of how the modern web is built. The only question left is, what part of this incredible digital world are you going to explore next? Thanks for tuning in.